Head coach Dan Devine wasn't very well liked in Green Bay, but things took a sinister turn when one morning a gunshot went off. Who shot Dan Devine's dog? Before we get to the poor dead canine, we need to talk about who exactly Dan Devine was. He had the unenviable task of taking over from Vince Lombardi, not straight after. That was this guy, Phil Bengtson.
Gentlemen, let me introduce to you now the new head coach of the Green Bay Packers, Mr. Phil Bengtson.
Great things were expected of Dan Devine, when he came to Green Bay because he was so successful in college. But per an article by Cliff Crystal, there were rumours that he was very good at hiring good people, but he himself was not a good coach. So here comes this article that we're talking about, and this comes from Time magazine, where Dan Devine said that there was Vince Lombardi holdovers in Green Bay and they soon came up with the idea that he was incompetent. In this Time magazine article from October 1974, he mentions a load of stuff that allegedly happened to him, including screaming at his family in the stands, spitting on his kids on the school bus, ringing his phone at night time with expletive-laden rants, going by his house honking the horn, and it all came to a head when one morning he heard a gunshot and someone had shot his dog. It's very believable that someone did this in a malicious way, because he was not liked in Green Bay. The players were going to boycott him, they were going to boycott preseason, then they were going to boycott a game in Atlanta, and even the executive committee of the Packers would openly badmouth Dan Devine. So let's ask the question then, who did shoot Dan Devine's dog? Was it a disgruntled player? Was it a boycotting member of the public? Was it someone who spat on his kids on the bus? No, the answer is a little bit more simple. Dan Devine lived on farmland west of Green Bay, but leading up to the incident, Dan Devine would let his dogs roam around the locality at free will. A farmer from the locality had approached Dan Devine and asked him to lock up his dogs because they were chasing his chickens. Big deal, right? But this farmer had 14 children and depended on the chickens' eggs to provide for his family. Dan Devine ignored him. So one morning, the farmer took it in his own hands, the gun that is, went over to Dan Devine's property and put the dog out of its misery. How cruel, you'd say. How horrible. But that was not unheard of at the time. In fact, locals said that there was a local dog catcher who you could actually call to do the task for you, so it wasn't an undone thing at the time. It seems less malicious when you know that the farmer who actually shot the dog used to plough Dan Devine's front yard for him, so they were neighbourly. People apparently knew that the dogs were running loose and didn't bat an eyelid when it happened. In fact, some people say there was a few giggles around the neighbourhood. But due to the Time article, the rumour persisted that the dog was shot by a disgruntled fan or a disgruntled employee, when in fact this was not true. This was just part of the narrative that was put across in this Time magazine article in 1974, but for what it's worth, Cliff Crystal, famous Packers historian and ex-journalist, came out and said in an article that Dan Devine was the most paranoid and most devious coach that he's ever covered for the Green Bay Packers, and that goes back a long time. And so we've solved the mystery on who shot Dan Devine's dog.